Hey guys, it's Dasha. Welcome back to my channel, and welcome to what is going to be a bit of a chatty catching up slash October wrap up slash November end of the year TBR video. If you do not want to be here for the kind of housekeeping things, there are timestamps down below. You can skip to the TBR or to the wrap up, whatever you're more interested in. But I'm gonna start by first of all apologizing for having been absent for a little bit. October was my birthday month, and I also had like a huge festival that I was going to that kind of took up a lot of my time and like my brain power, so I didn't read very much. I didn't really want to film. I kind of hit a bit of a slump because I was just so excited to do something that I hadn't been able to do in a year and a half. So my apologies for being absent. I'm back and I'm like happy to be here. If you're curious, I went to Vegas for EDC Las Vegas, which was a time and a half. It was really nice to be back to doing something I loved, because my two main hobbies, surprisingly, are music and traveling. Like reading is like a big hobby of mine, but it's not like the one I spend the most time or money on normally. Yeah, I couldn't do either of those two things during the pandemic, so it was really nice to be back. But I'm back. I'm going to be filming and reading some more, hopefully, and I'm excited for like all the end of the year content and planning out my reading year next year, so there's gonna be all of that happening. But yeah, just a very quick apology for having kind of dropped off the face of the earth and not being super active, but I am back. So last month, my October TBR included 6 books because I had a punishment and I had all sorts of reading plans, and essentially they didn't pan out. I had 6 books on my TBR. Fuck off. I had 6 books on my TBR and I read 3, one of which was not even on my TBR and was a graphic novel. So it didn't go very well. I had to read The Eye of the World. I think the prompt was to read a book in a series. I had Meditations, which was to read a classic. My Heart is a Chainsaw, which is my most recent purchase, I believe. Helter Skelter, which was to read a book about strong family ties. And then I had The Magicians by Love Grossman, which was Robin's pick for a book she hated for my punishment. And on top of that, I had Kingdom of Copper, which was to read a book with a female main character. I have completed Kingdom of Copper, Helter Skelter, and I also read the first volume of Saga, the graphic novel. So I do technically deserve a punishment for last month. However, I will not be taking one in November. I will explain all of that later. But yeah, I completely failed my TBR. I thought I would really quickly go over the books that I had read just to kind of avoid having to make a whole separate video since there's literally only 3 books. And there's a couple that I started that I'm gonna like quickly mention, but I doubt I'm gonna finish any other books when I'm filming this. We are the 29th when I'm filming, so it's not looking too hot for me. So starting off with Kingdom of Copper by S.A. Chakraborty. This was a buddy read with Ray. We are reading the entire Daevabad trilogy. So next month, obviously, I'm going to be finishing up the series with Empire of Gold. And this is an adult fantasy about a woman who is kind of a con artist in Cairo until one day she accidentally summons a Jinn warrior who realizes that she has some Jinn blood in her, and the warrior takes her to Daevabad, the magical city of the Jinn, and her world gets blown wide open. There's all sorts of royal political intrigue and all this other stuff going on, so it's really, really exciting to discover everything through her eyes. And honestly, I did not like the second book as much as the first. It suffered a lot from pacing issues, I found, and there was a lot of weird little plot twists and like threads thrown in that felt like they were just trying to keep you engaged. And this book really suffered from middle book syndrome as a result of the pacing and like the plot twists that were kind of thrown in. I was left a little disappointed, truthfully. I found that it was just kind of just a little too much trying to get you like thinking and guessing and stuff rather than really developing the world, which was my favorite part of this. I felt like there was things that we saw that gave us a little bit of insight, but the majority was focused on building up to the finale, or what is going to be the finale in the 3rd book, and I found it ultimately kind of disappointing. Like the end was still very explosive. There was a huge event that happens that you get to see, but it still didn't feel final. It didn't feel like there was any resolution for the book to really stand on its own, and I understand it's a series, but I didn't really love it. There was things about it that I still absolutely loved. I love a lot of the characters and I love the world building and the intrigue. I think the magic is just so cool, and I do like the writing in terms of it being fairly digestible and like fast paced. But this one ended up getting a 3.5 stars for me just because I liked it a bit less than the first one. It left me with a lot of questions and kind of concerns about the finality of a lot of things that happened. So I am still excited to read the next book though. I'm really excited to finish off this series. I'm having a ton of fun reading it with Ray. I'm really enjoying being able to bounce like theories and stuff off of her, and it's a really fun reading experience. So I'm not hating it. I also finished Helter Skelter by Vincent Bugliosi. So this is a nonfiction account of the trial of the Manson family, as well as the murders that happened before the trial that the trial is for. And this was really interesting because I actually did not know anything about the Manson murders going into this. For some reason, my true crime knowledge has a gap when it comes to the Manson family. Either they weren't interesting enough, or I didn't think they were for me to look into them, or I just never really got a chance to sit down and learn about them. But regardless of the reason, I didn't realize just how much influence they had on pop culture and how much of popular American culture is shaped around them. So I was really glad to get a very in-depth perspective in this. The writing was really easy to follow. It was gripping. This seems like a very long book, and it is about 640 pages, I believe, but I flew through it. I was able to read over 100 pages at a time because it was just very enticing and like I wanted to keep reading. It was interesting. I personally really enjoyed the aspect of having the court case be so fully developed, because often in true crime media the focus is really on the crimes themselves and the perpetrator, and while I understand that is most people's fascination with true crime, as a law nerd, I really enjoy seeing the behind the scenes, the burden of proof and the evidence that they have, and the struggles that come up during the trial, how other lawyers act, how the jurors act, and all that kind of stuff. So this was really interesting from that perspective. One big thing I did not love was that since this is written by the prosecutor in the case, he tends to puff himself up a little bit. I feel like this wasn't the most objective view of this case, and obviously that's something to be aware of going into this, and like I was aware, but it just kind of came through a little bit. The other thing I really want to point out is that this book was written in the 70s. There are a lot of slurs in here and words that we technically would know not to use today, so just kind of be aware of that. And the slurs are both racial, and there are some against people with mental health issues, and that's something that's kind of a product of the time, I guess, but I think you should be aware if you're going into it because it is still very jarring to read. I think the book holds up other than that. I think it does a really good job of focusing on the social climate around the time of the case and the murders, as well as, you know, just the sheer craziness of the family and Manson himself, and just going to show how absurd he is. It doesn't really romanticize him. It shows how he was romanticized, but the book in itself does not romanticize him, I find. And overall, it was really fascinating, but there's just a few things that kind of irked me. I ended up giving this a 4-star rating because I truly enjoyed it. Now, if you know the story, this might not be as enjoyable to you, perhaps. I thought it was really in-depth and fascinating, but the story in itself is fascinating, so that could be part of it. So just be aware if you know the story. If you're well familiar with the story, this might be really friggin' boring to you, but I thought it was a really fun time otherwise. Finally, I picked up the first volume of Saga. This is a sci-fi comic that is pretty beloved here on BookTube and beyond. I know that there's like a huge cult following behind it, and the authors recently announced that they're coming back from a hiatus. I think they published 9 volumes and then they just kind of disappeared for a little while. So I'm glad to be picking it up around the time that they're coming back. I think they're coming back in like January or February. So I have plenty of time to read all of it, which I will be doing because this is a good time. Basically, you are set in this world where like intergalactic travel is possible, and you are kind of zeroed in on the goings on around this couple who have just had a child. This couple is from 2 warring factions, so they are technically not allowed to fraternize at all, much less have a child. So you are not only following their experience and them, but you're also following people who are trying to hunt them down. So it makes for a really immersive experience. The mind of these creators to come up with some of the imagery in here is insane. I was hooked. It was a very quick read because it's a comic, but I was also just so engaged the whole time. I really want more. And in my mind, when I think about this compared to the only other comic that I'd read, which was Monstrous, or graphic novel, however you want to call them, this was just in my mind, so much better done for being set in a more fictional world. It makes me realize how much I actually didn't enjoy Monsters that much, and that the issue is not with the fact that it is a graphic novel, but rather with the world building and how the authors presented the story. This was phenomenal. I cannot wait to continue the series. I'm definitely going to go ahead and collect them all because I would absolutely reread this. It's endearing and funny and emotional, and it's just an absolute must read if you enjoy sci-fi at all and or just great epics. It's just a really interesting story, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I also have started 2 books. I started Meditations, which was on my TBR, as well as The Eye of the World. I'm not far enough in these to give like a review. I might finish this before the month is over, but I don't really feel the need to like talk about it because it's more philosophical, which is a bit of like a personal experience. From what I've read so far, I have enjoyed it. Same with The Eye of the World. From what I've read so far, I'm about 60 pages in. Yeah, I'm absolutely loving this. I have a feeling this is going to creep up there as a new favorite series. I'm already really jiving with the writing style, which I know is some people's issue, so I'm excited to see where this goes. So yeah, that was my October wrap up. Short and sweet. There was not that much going on. Going forward, so in November, I thought about maybe not doing a TBR since I have so many books that I need to finish from the month of October. For example, I still want to read The Magicians, which Robin had picked for me. I know that she hates the book, so I'm curious to just read it anyways during the month of November maybe and see how I feel. Just for curiosity's sake, even though I am taking a punishment. I will not be taking a punishment in November, and I will not be making a round of Game of Tomes for December. Therefore, the punishment for October will carry over to January. The reason I'm not going to be doing a round in December is that I have a lot of end of the year content planned, and I kind of don't want to stress myself out by following a TBR. I'm sure you guys can understand. I'm sorry if like you were looking forward to it. I'm not going to be doing any like Christmas special or anything. I'm just really looking forward to picking up books by mood, spending time with my family, and focusing on some end of the year content. But I will be back in January with a fresh round of Game of Tomes. I will do November's as well, and hopefully that is not an issue. I just can't imagine having a set TBR in December, to be honest. In November, for reading plans, I do have my readathon, a Game of Tomes The Origin Story, which is the mini round happening from November 1st to the 14th. If somehow you have missed the announcement, it will be linked down below, as well as a video of recommendations for each of the paths and the prompts. I will not spoil more than that. If you have not watched it yet and you want to maybe participate, I'd go watch that first because I will be talking about the choices for the path I will be taking in here. So if you don't want to like know anything, you want to go in, I would suggest doing that first and then coming back. But I do have my readathon that will be taking place over 2 weeks. There's just 3 books, so it's going to be fairly easy to fit in. And I'm doing Clear Your Shit again this year, which is a readathon focused on reading books that you own and really trying to focus on whittling down your own TBR. This takes place over 2 months, so a lot of the books would be able to carry over, I'm thinking. So hopefully that would work out the way I want it to. But some of the books are going to be like some of the first prompts starting November 1st. So some of those I'll try to fit in with my Game of Tomes TBR. And at the end, I'll kind of show you a few other books I'm thinking of reading for the end of the year in November and December. So that being said, let's get into the roles for November. Let's see what I'm reading. Alright, so we ended up here last month. Like I mentioned, I'm not going to be doing a punishment pick, so we're going to go ahead right into roll number 1. 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, we get Joffrey. I cannot abide the wailing of women. Read a book featuring royalty. It's Friday, forgive me. Okay, first roll, we got Joffrey. I have to pick a book featuring royalty, so this one's pretty easy. I'm gonna go right on ahead with Empire of Gold, get that in there. This is the 3rd book in the Daevabad trilogy. I just talked about how I didn't love Kingdom of Copper, the 2nd book, but I am still quite excited. So I'm going to be reading this with Ray, obviously. I'm really excited to see where the story ends up. I'm really curious to see how our characters end up from this whole mess that happened in book 2, so I am pretty excited for it. I was not like super impressed by book 2, but I can tell that there's gonna be like an epic ending, so I'm very curious to see how it goes. I forgot to mention, but I ended up dropping all of my cards earlier, so they're all shuffled. There might be some that we've gotten before, I'm not 100% sure, so if that happens, I had to shuffle them at some point anyways, but yeah, that might happen, because I did, yeah, drop the whole freaking deck. Roll number 2, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we get a wild card. Oh, fuck yeah. All right, we then got a wild card. So for this one, I struggled a little bit, I'm not gonna lie, because this literally means anything. So I had to try to be strategic. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick Sin Eater by Megan Campisi. So this is one I found on my shelves for a while. Always forget about it because it's tucked behind some of my like series and stuff, because it's obviously like a standalone. It's kind of, you know, it's kind of weird by itself. And it's not a book that I'm like super pumped for, but I have had it on my shelves for a while. The other reason I'm picking this is because it has 2 words in the title, which is one of the prompts for my readathon path. So I think this is going to be the easiest way to get that in there as the wild card, because I don't think any of the other books I own would really fit this. So yeah, I'm gonna stick this in here. As far as I know, this is kind of a reimagining of actual historical figures. Back in England, when someone died, someone came to their funeral called a Sin Eater, and the Sin Eater would eat a fruit, vegetable, a piece of food that was representative of the person's sins. So once that deceased person had their sin eaten by the Sin Eater, they could continue on to heaven purified. And this concept kind of takes it a little bit further. If I'm not mistaken, there are some speculative elements to it, and there's also like a royal subplot and like a conspiracy, and it's a fairly short book, which is also great for the readathon. But overall, I've just not heard a lot of things about this, which always has me a little bit intrigued, and I would like to get through some of my own books. I am terrible at forgetting about some of the books I own. This one will fulfill a prompt for my readathon, and also hopefully, you know, it becomes either a new favorite or I can get it off my shelves. Either way, I'm gonna be whittling down my own TBR, which is a bonus. Roll number 3, 2, 1, 2. City of Carth. Read a book with a light cover. Alright, so next we had Carth. I had to pick an owned book that has a light cover. This one was pretty easy. I'm going to be reading Moon of the Crusted Snow by Wapgeshig Rice. So this is a novel set in a small indigenous town that kind of gets cut off from the rest of the world during a massive storm, and then strangers start arriving. It's kind of horror and apocalyptic at the same time. I've not heard a lot of people talk about this, but I picked it up at a local indie bookstore that like prioritized indigenous books, and they had it like right front and center, and I thought it looked kind of intriguing. It's really, really short too, which I like. I'm always down for a shorter book. This also does fulfill the prompt for my readathon. I have to read a book that has wintry vibes, and it is set during the winter. The cover features winter. It's Moon of the Crusted Snow. I think this works perfectly for that. I'm really excited to read this. I think this is going to be very much up my alley in terms of themes of like isolation and distrust, which I normally really like in my horror, so I'm really excited for this. Rule number 4, 3, 1, 2, 3. Sir Mormont, are you a brother of the Night's Watch, or only a bastard boy who wants to play at war? Read a book published before the year 2000. Next, we have Sir Mormont, the Lord Commander at the Wall, and the prompt is to read a book published before 2000, so I've decided to go with a classic, which is kind of in line with my goals for the rest of the year. If you did not see, I made a video talking about reassessing my goals once we got past the halfway mark of the year, and how I wanted to realign some of them because I wasn't doing as hot with some as I wanted, and one of these goals was to read more classics. So I've decided to go with As I Lay Dying by William Faulkner. The only thing I know about this is that it is a classic about a family who are on their way to bring the matron of the family to her final resting place. That's kind of all I know. There is a booktuber that both me and my boyfriend love watching because he's a little bit older, and he's just very eloquent, and he reads a lot of classics and subversive books. And this was one that he recommended. He really, really enjoyed it. He did like a full deep dive on it on his channel, and it was really fascinating. I'll link it down below if you want to watch. His channel is fantastic. But yeah, he really recommended this book. It's pretty short, and I thought it sounded like something that could be really interesting thematically, which is what I really enjoy in classics. I don't really care much when it comes to like commentary on the time when it was written, but I really enjoy themes that last through the ages. So this seems like it'll be up my alley, and it goes in line with my goal of reading more classics, which is always good. This was first published in the year 1930, so this is perfectly in line with my prompt to read a book published before the year 2000. And roll number 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. House Stark, which is a reread. Our final roll got us to House Stark, and that is the prompt to reread a favorite. So this works out pretty well. I recently got my hands on the entirety of the Poppy War trilogy, so I will be rereading the first book, The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. So this is an adult fantasy. It's kind of a reimagining of the Sino-Japanese War as well as the Opium Wars, and you are following a young girl who is from a kind of poorer province, and she is determined to get to the top military school. She can't afford it, so she knows she has to ace the test to get her in. And once that happens, she is facing all kinds of other difficulties. People don't accept her at the school, people are doubting her, and then on top of that, before her education is even finished, a war breaks out. This first book I read back in April of last year, I think, and I absolutely fell in love. This was one of the coolest blends of history and fantasy that I've ever come across. And it also involves like gods and god magic, which is another buzzword for me, honestly. I just think this was such a unique book. I've never read anything like it. I think it truthfully deserves all the hype that it gets. I know a lot of people complain about the main character. I found her quite realistic in that she has a chip on her shoulder and she has a lot to prove, so she's not always the most rational human being, and I really enjoyed following her as an unlikable character. And I know that the rest of the series makes people absolutely like lose their minds, and I'm really excited to continue it. So I think I am due for a reread of the first book in order to complete the rest of the series. Fingers crossed, and I'm really excited to be back in this world. So here is my fairly manageable Game of Tomes TBR for the game, of course. I am really excited for all of these, honestly. Maybe not Sin Eater as much, but I am excited to see what it's about since I haven't heard anyone talk about it. And I'm pretty happy with this. I managed to put some smaller books on my TBR, which is good because I have some bigger ones that I would like to read throughout the next 2 months. So we'll go over those really quickly. I do have the end of the year book tag coming out where I do mention some of the books that I would like to read. I think they ask you for just 3 books that you're looking to read. So one of those is the Book of S. I've mentioned this one a few times. It intimidates me, but I think I might be able to find some time to buckle down and read it. So that's one I'm gonna try to squeeze into my Clear Your Shit TBR as well. Same with Jesus and John Wayne. I've talked about this one a few times, so I'm not gonna go too far into it, but this is another one that I'm really hoping to prioritize. I would also like to finish up a few series, so read Assassin's Quest by Robin Hobb, the 3rd book in the Farseer trilogy. I ended up ordering the entirety of the Live Ship Traders series because I'm just absolutely in love with Robin Hobb's writing, so I would like to finish this one up, and then whenever I'm in the mood, get back into Robin Hobb, but that requires finishing up Fitz's story first. So hoping to get to this one very soon. Actually, I just have a few other fantasy books I need to finish. Same with the Dreamblood duology. I absolutely loved the first book, The Killing Moon. I'm absolutely friggin' obsessed with it. And somehow, after reading it in January, I still have not picked up the sequel. It's literally only a duology. This has been on my shelf for ages. It is embarrassing, and I'm going to finish it this year. I will not be dragging this into next year, I swear to God. This is one I am friggin' pumped for. I think I also mentioned A Little Life recently. I think it's on my list of books to read this year. I mentioned it in my mid-year freakout, I believe, that this is one I want to read. Even in my October TBR, I was saying that this is one I'll get to soon. I still would like that to be the case. I am still excited for it. We'll see if that happens. This one was on my 5-star prediction list. I have a copy now. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. This is like an emotional sci-fi kind of, like a very cozy sci-fi. You're following like a group of travelers aboard a spaceship, and I'm thinking this would be a good one to pick up in like the fall winter because it seems, like I said, cozy. And since it is a 5-star prediction, that means I'm more excited for it, so we'll see how that goes. And yeah, there's like a few other random ones for the Clear Your Shit that I'll just I'll pick up whatever's in the mood that might fit the prompts. Like I have a few small books that could work for I think there's a prompt for like your shortest book and then like your smallest book. So I think my shortest one is Taming of the Shrew. And then my smallest one is this teeny tiny philosophy book. I've been kind of getting into philosophy, or at least I kind of enjoy dipping in and out of it. So I like ordered a few, as you clearly saw, with meditations and the fact that I'm still reading The Human Condition, I think. So I thought I'd pick up another one. This is kind of like an introductory one. There's a lot of books still on my list. There's even more that I have tentatively planned for Clear Your Shit, but I won't get into all of those because that's all very fluid, that could all change. But yeah, that's kind of my tentative TBR for the rest of the year. Do keep an eye out for my end of the year tag, which will have kind of more detailed thoughts about like what I think I'm gonna love, the 3 books I really want to read, and some other stuff. Yeah, that is it for today. Sorry if it was a little chatty and all over the place. I'm trying to get back into the groove of filming. There will be regular videos going forward. I'm excited to get back into the flow of things, so thank you for your patience. My social media is linked down below. You guys can always come talk to me there, and as I mentioned, I've also linked the details for my readathon below. Please go check it out. We worked really hard on this, and I am really excited to see you all on November 1st for the origin story. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!